Welcome to the Build Your Private Practice podcast, a space for Canadian therapists who want to support others, make an impact, and build a sustainable practice that works for them too. I'm your host, Liane Wood, a registered psychotherapist, group practice owner, and business mentor, and I'm here to help you build a private practice that allows you to keep doing the work you love without burning out. Because the people who need your help the most are counting on you, and you deserve a practice that supports you while you support them. Let's dive in. Here's what I wish someone had told me about starting a private practice. The systems you set up in your first 6 months will decide whether you grow steadily or burn out trying. Booking by email, tracking sessions in a spreadsheet, chasing payments, that's the path most practitioners regret. Jane is the practice management software that I point BYPP members to when they're setting up their first practice. Scheduling, charting, billing, and online payments all in one place. Built in Canada by people whose mission is to help the helpers. New to practice? Check out the new practice guide from Jane. Links are in the show notes below. Welcome back to the Build Your Private Practice podcast. I'm your host, Liane Wood, and this is the podcast for Canadian mental health practitioners who are ready to build a private practice that supports your life, not one that quietly drains you in the name of helping people. Today, it's just me and you, and a topic that I know is loaded for a lot of therapists, but I think we need to talk about it honestly. Today, we're going to talk about your fee. Now, before you click away, I want to invite you to stay with me because this is not the kind of money episode you might be bracing for. I'm not going to tell you what to charge, and I'm not going to give you a formula and tell you to plug your numbers into it tonight. And I'm not going to shame you for the fee you have now or push you to double it by next Tuesday. What I want to do is shift the way you think about how your fee gets set in the first place, because I think most therapists are setting fees in a way that is doing them a disservice. And not because they're doing anything wrong, but because they were never shown another way. A therapist on a coaching call with me this week told me what she charges for an hour. And I asked her how she landed on that number, and she paused. And then she said, "It felt right." That was her whole answer. It felt right. Then, almost in passing and almost as a side note at the end of the call, she mentioned that she had just signed up for a new referral service, the kind of service that takes a percentage of every session she ever runs through them. Not for a year, forever. Two fee decisions made in the same week in the same practice, and neither one had run through any math. I want you to sit with that for a second, because if you're anything like the therapist I work with, and statistically you probably are, there's a really good chance that the fee you're currently charging was set in approximately the same way. You picked a number that felt right, or you looked at what your colleagues charge in your city and you landed somewhere in the middle of that range because the middle felt safe. Or you started with a number that your first employer paid you when you were doing contract work, and you've been bumping that number up by $10 or so every couple of years, mostly when other people raised theirs, mostly when you felt brave enough. And there's no shame in any of that. Almost nobody is teaching us another way. Nobody hands you a fee-setting workbook when you get your registration and license. The grad program doesn't cover it. Your first supervisor probably didn't cover it. Other therapists you've talked to mostly do the same thing you do. And so this is what gets passed down person to person, generation to generation in our profession. We pick a number that feels right, and then we live with it. But here's the thing I want to say today. And I'm going to say it clearly because I think nobody is saying it clearly enough. Your hourly fee is not a number you pick. It is a number you should reverse engineer. And I want to unpack what I mean. Most therapists, when they set their fee, do what I'm going to call polling. Polling is when you survey your peers, formally or informally. Find out what other people in your area, in your specialty, with your level of experience are charging, and you place yourself somewhere on that distribution. If everyone in your city is charging, say, between $150 and $220, then you probably charge somewhere between $170 and $200. You pick the middle, right? Because you feel safe in the middle, and you assume that the middle is reasonable, because if it was unreasonable, surely all those other therapists would not be doing it. That is polling. It's not fee setting. And here is what is actually happening when you poll. You look at the result of other people's untaught, unexamined, and often shame based fee decisions, and you're using their decisions as your benchmark, which means that the entire field is, in a sense, copying each other's homework, and none of us has actually run the math on the original assignment. If everyone in town is undercharging by 30%, the middle of that range is still 30% undercharged. The middle of an unexamined distribution is still unexamined. Polling is a really comforting way to feel like you've done due diligence. It feels rigorous. You can say to yourself, I checked. I looked at what other people charge. I'm in the middle. I'm being reasonable. But you have not actually answered the question of whether your fee makes your practice work. You've only answered the question of whether your fee is socially defensible. And those are two different questions, and only one of them keeps the lights in your practice on. So here's the reframe, and this is the sentence I want you to carry with you out of this episode. Your fee is not an input, it is an output. Your fee is not an input, it's an output. You do not pick your fee, you calculate it. Your fee is what your practice model produces, given the income you want to take home, the hours you can sustainably work, and the costs you actually have. When you treat your fee as an input, something you decide based on what feels right or what your peers charge or what you think the market will bear, you are essentially handing the rest of the math up to chance. Your income will be whatever shows up after the year is over. Your hours will be whatever it takes to make that work. And your stress level will be a downstream consequence of a number you picked in 5 seconds 3 years ago. When you treat your fee as an output, when you start with the life you want to fund and the hours you're willing to give to clinical work, and you work backwards from there, the number is no longer a feeling, it's a result. It is whatever it has to be to make the rest of the picture make sense. And that shift, in my experience, is the difference between a therapist who is white knuckling her practice and a therapist who is running her practice with clear eyes. So I want to walk you through what the inputs actually are. I'm not going to teach you the math today, that's a different episode. What I want is for you to hear out loud the things that should be sitting in the calculation, because most therapists I work with have never seen anyone name them before. The first input is the take-home income you actually want, not what would be nice, not what feels reasonable. The number that, if it landed in your account every month for the next 5 years, would let you live the life you actually want to live, the mortgage you actually have, the vacation you actually want to take, and the retirement you are actually building, the kids' braces, the dog's surgery, the savings you wish you had, that number. Notice what comes up in your body when I name that. For a lot of therapists, the number is meaningfully higher than the income their current fee produces. And the gap between those two numbers is doing damage in the background, whether you have ever named it or not. Now, the second input is the clinical hours you can sustainably keep year after year without burning out. Not the hours you can do in your strongest week, not the hours you did in 2019 when you were younger and had more in the tank. The number you can actually run 50 weeks a year for the next 5 years without arriving at the end of it depleted. For most of the therapists I work with, that number is smaller than they think. Usually it's somewhere between 15 and 25 clinical hours a week, with admin and supervision and rest layered around it. The fantasy is 30 or more. The honest reality is closer to 20. The third input is your fixed costs, the unglamorous monthly numbers that come out of your account whether you see a single client or not. Office rent, software subscriptions, insurance, liability, business, and sometimes disability insurance, supervision, continuing education, your accountant, your bookkeeper, marketing, the website hosting fees you've not looked at in 3 years, the Canva subscription, the whole base of running a real practice. The fourth input is your variable costs, the numbers that move with each session, but that still come off the top before any of it is yours. Payment processing fees, referral fees, the percentage you pay associates if you have a group practice, the cost of no-shows, the real cost of churn, the clients who book, do 2 sessions, and then disappear. That is the math. Take home income that you want. Sustainable hours, fixed costs, variable costs. Run those numbers honestly. And the fee that falls out of the bottom is the fee your practice actually requires. I'll tell you what I see when therapists run this math for the first time. Almost universally, the fee that falls out of the calculation is meaningfully higher than the one they've been charging. Not by $5, often by 20 or 40 or 60. And the reaction in the room every single time is the same. There's a beat of silence. There's kind of a held breath. And then there is something that sounds like, oh, or I didn't know. And I want to be clear about something. The therapists I work with are not unintelligent and they're not bad with numbers. They have just never had anyone hand them a framework like that. They've spent years polling instead of calculating, and the gap has been quietly growing the whole time. So let me go back to the therapist I mentioned at the top of this episode. She just signed up for a referral service that was going to take a percentage of every session she ever ran through that source forever. There was no opt out at the 1 year mark. There was no escalating scale. It was a permanent slice off the top of every session for as long as that client stayed with her and for every new client that came through that pipeline. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not telling you that all referral services are bad. And I'm not telling you that all percentage-based arrangements are predatory. Some of them are genuinely useful. They bring you clients you would not otherwise find in specialties where the market is hard to reach, and the math can work. But the math has to be run. And in this case, the math had not been run. So here's what a forever percentage actually costs. If your fee is $200 a session and the service takes 15%, that is $30 off of every session. And if you see that client weekly for a year, or let's just call it 40 sessions, then that's $1,200 from one client. Now, if you saw 10 clients through that pipeline for a year, that's $12,000 a year for 1 year for 10 clients. But the agreement is not for 1 year, it's forever. So if in the next year you get another 10 clients, plus the first 10 clients from this first year, that number starts to compound. And over a career of 15, 20, 25 years, the dollar figure attached to that one decision, the one that was made in a few minutes between sessions, because the platform looked nice and the onboarding was easy, becomes a six-figure number, sometimes deep into six figures. She didn't see that number and couldn't see that number because no one handed her a calculator, right? And that is what happens when fee decisions get made without math. The cost doesn't show up today, it shows up over a decade. And by the time you can see it, you've lost a meaningful percentage of the income that should have been funding your life. Every session that she runs through that source, she is, in a real sense, working the first several minutes of the hour for free. And that free time was not a gift she meant to give. It was a tax she didn't know she was signing up for. So that is the cost of fee decisions made without math. And let me tell you what happens when fee decisions do get run through the math. What changes for the therapist who stops polling and starts calculating? Three things change, and I'm going to name them. The first thing that changes is that you stop apologizing for your fee. Not because you become arrogant or hard-hearted, or, to use the word people throw around, transactional, but because you stop seeing your fee as a number you picked and you start seeing it as a number your business required. The apology fades because there's nothing to apologize for. The number is what the math says. You didn't pick it to be greedy. You picked it because the alternative is a practice that does not work mathematically. When a client pushes back on the fee, and clients do sometimes push back, your nervous system responds differently. You are not defending a number you picked from a feeling, you're holding a number you calculated from a model, and that is steadier ground. The second thing that changes is that you start saying no to the arrangements that quietly erode the model. The forever referral fee, the platform that takes a percentage off the top in exchange for visibility, the associate split that doesn't actually account for your overhead, the contract with the EAP that pays half your standard fee and expects you to be grateful. You do not say no to all of them. Some of them might still make sense given your goals and your stage, but you say no with intention. You can run the math on whether it works for your model, and if it does not, you walk away without all the guilt that used to come with walking away. The third thing that changes is that you start changing your fee on a schedule, not because you have something to prove, because the math shifts every year whether you adjust or not. Your fixed costs go up. Your software subscriptions go up. Your insurance goes up. Your accountant goes up. The cost of being you professionally goes up. If your fee does not move with those costs, you are quietly giving yourself a pay cut every year. Most therapists I know have given themselves years of quiet pay cuts without realizing it. The number on the invoice looked the same, and so it felt like the fee was holding, but the math underneath was eroding the whole time. A scheduled fee change, small, predictable every 1 or 2 years, is one of the simplest ways to stop that erosion. It's not aggressive, it's not greedy, it's maintenance. It's the same thing your dentist does to their own fees, your accountant does to theirs, and your hairdresser does as well. And you are allowed to do it too. Those three shifts, not apologizing, not saying yes to fee erosion, and changing your fee on a schedule, do not happen because you suddenly got harder or became transactional. They happen because you finally have a number that is grounded in something real. And that math gives you the steadiness, and the steadiness gives you rest. So here's what I want to invite you to do this week. Not change your fee, not yet, not until you have the math. Open a spreadsheet or a notebook or a Google Doc, anything where you can put numbers next to other numbers and start to fill in the inputs. The take-home income you actually want per year. Be honest, nobody is looking. The real number. The clinical hours you can sustainably run per week, 50 weeks a year without burning out. Your fixed costs per year, list them out. Office, software, insurance, supervision, CEs, accounting, marketing, the Canva subscription, all of it. Your variable costs, payment processing, referral fees, any percentages, the estimated costs of no-shows and churn. Just list them. Just look at them. You don't have to do the math yet, and you don't have to make a decision. You just have to be willing to see the picture. I will tell you what I see in this exercise over and over. The act of just writing it down, just naming the inputs, changes something in the practitioner. The fee stops feeling like a feeling, it starts feeling like a question with an answer. And you may discover when you sit with the inputs that the fee you've been charging is more or less in line with what the math says. Wonderful! You have a peace of mind that you didn't have before. But you may also discover there's a real gap. The fee is meaningfully below what the math actually requires, and that is information too. And it doesn't mean you have to fix it tomorrow. It means you have a real, honest, non-shame-based view of where things actually sit. And from there, you can make a plan. From there, you can decide on a timeline. And from there, you can change something slowly and intentionally over the next year. The fee change does not have to be dramatic. The shift in how you think about the fee might be. So, a few last things before I let you go. If this episode has landed for you, if you're sitting somewhere right now realizing that your fee was set in a way that has nothing to do with the math your practice actually needs, please don't let that turn into shame, because that is not what I want this episode to do. The therapists I work with are not bad practice owners. They are clinicians who were never taught the business piece of private practice, working in a profession where almost nobody is teaching it, surrounded by other clinicians making the same unexamined choices. That is the context, and that is what we are inside of. The shift is not about blaming yourself for the past. It's about choosing differently from here. If you want to tell me what has come up for you as you've listened to this episode, what's landed, what made your stomach drop, what you noticed in your body, I would love to hear about it. You can email me, you can find me on Instagram, send me a DM. I read them all. And it's just because I want to know what's happening in your practice this week. If you know another therapist who's been white knuckling her fee for a while, please share this episode. The math is the math, but the permission to look at it honestly is something you can give to a colleague this week. It's one of the kindest things you can do for them. Now, if you're new to this podcast, welcome. I am so glad you're here. The easiest way to make sure you do not miss a new episode is to hit subscribe or follow in whatever app you're listening in. New episodes come out every Monday. And before I go, one more thing, and I want to say it directly. Your fee is not a measure of how good a therapist you are. It is not a measure of how much you care about your clients, and it's not a measure of your worth as a human being. It is a number that, when set well, lets you keep doing this work for the next 20 years with energy left over for your own life. A fee that is too low for too long ends careers. It does. I've watched it happen, not because anyone meant to set themselves up for that, but because the math was never run. You're allowed to run the math, and you're allowed to see what falls out, and you're allowed to set your fee at the number your practice actually requires. Take care of yourself, take care of your practice, and I'll see you next Monday. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Build Your Private Practice podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a fellow Canadian therapist who needs this. And remember, the work you do matters. Keep showing up, keep holding space, and keep building a practice that works for you. If you're looking for practical tools or support to grow your practice with more clarity and confidence, head to buildyourprivatepractice.ca. There's lots waiting for you there. I'll see you next time.